Welcome to Stay Tuned. My name is Rei Hotoda, and I'm the music director of the Fresno Philharmonic. And Stay Tuned is an opportunity for us to get to know our composers who are featured in our Digital MasterWorks this year in 2021. So today, I'm so thrilled to introduce to you Jasmine Barnes. Hi, Jasmine.
Hi.
We will be performing your piece next week, Resistance for Brass Quintet. And
Yes.
I'm just so thrilled to have you on. Stay tuned. Um, Tell us a little bit about the piece Resistance.
All right. So Resistance is a brass quintet piece. And it came from the concept really of, for me, it reflects this feeling of militancy that we kind of all just kind of default into and kind of go throughout a kind of like a routine kind of thing. And resistance for me represents the stepping away or against what is expected of you when doing something else. And you know, it's still being allowed to be beautiful. I think that to me is, a big deal about even the idea of resistance. A lot of people when they hear resistance, they think negativity. But I think it actually can be from a positive place, stepping out of what is expected of us and the societal norms and things like that, and seeing how it can actually add layer to what already exists and what already is there. So
Well,
hopefully.
and right. And that's the reason why I chose your piece, because I was listening to it. This was when I was programming it last year. I was thinking, what can we do that would really showcase African American composers and also women African American composers, which I was just so thrilled to find a brass piece, which is really difficult to find. Um,
Yes.
and that you wrote this piece, but it really spoke to what we were enduring and persevering through last year with the pandemic. This resistance to not complies, right, is in your
Right.
subtext of the piece.
Yes.
And we all had to adapt last year, and we are still adapting, and like you were
Yeah.
saying, resistance to push against what we're the norm, to push against what we're so comfortable with and try something different, right? And which is what
Yeah.
we're all trying to do
Yeah.
right now.
Absolutely. I think this time has shown us how often we have just fallen into a routine because it disrupted our routine so much that it was like, whoa, I had to rethink like how I'm going about my daily life. And that
Yeah.
I think everyone kind of went through, at least at some point, to say, oh, I have to like rethink my routine. And it's funny because I didn't write this piece obviously during, the pandemic. It's so interesting that it still has relevance and still takes this new life of, what we're facing now, that resistance is still relevant for time to come, because there will always be a place where everyone falls in line, and there will always be a space where you are allowed to be out of it. You know what I mean? So yeah.
And what I love about it is that it has these influences of popular music and a little bit
Mhm.
of jazz and blues in there. Tell us a little bit about your creative process as a composer.
Yeah, so me, I started actually writing. It's kind of interesting because I don't claim that I started actually writing until about 2012, 13 or so. But actually my first experience writing was actually in high school, and the first piece I ever wrote was a brass fanfare, because at the time I was playing the tuba and the marching band and pep band and concert band, and I also played the trumpet, percussion. That was kind of my background. So it's so interesting that from that I still ended up writing for brass, but just everything in general. But my process actually is heavily linked to singing, oddly enough. I hear everything in my head in voices and textures. And then when I put it to paper, I think of it as though it would be played in that way. And how do I want to hear voices do things? And how do I want to, and I feel that all of this is just a collection of like my own personal past time in life, like my childhood. I, grew up in church. My parents are pastors. Actually, my mom is a pastor. My dad is a pastor. My grandmother's a preacher. So I was in church 24/7, just about. It felt like it. Um, so that was a heavy musical influence for me. Church, jazz. My dad plays the trumpet, and he was the type of person you get in his car and you don't know what you're going to listen to. It could be jazz. It could be uh, I don't know, Earth, Wind and Fire. It could be anything. And it was just kind of like that influenced me more than I thought it did. But yes, my writing kind of reflects all of that just because I sing in these styles. Um, I listen to these styles, I internalize these styles, and it's just such a big part of my own personal history.
Well, and I want to let everyone know that you are an educator, and right now you are teaching at one of the foremost arts high schools in Dallas. Tell us,
Yes.
first of all, are you teaching online or in person right now?
In person, actually, we've been in person since
Amazing.
September. We've been in
Wow.
person since September. And so our academic teachers on campus, they actually teach virtually, but we teach them in person. So their time spent at home is focused on academics, and then their time on campus is strictly for the arts. So that's the hybrid model we've come up with. So yeah.
And what are the classes that you teach at this high school?
So my actual title is head of composition and jazz voice. So I teach composition, I teach songwriting, I teach jazz voice, obviously jazz vocal ensemble. Um, I also teach music theory. Actually, every faculty member, as far as music goes, we all teach music theory in some level. Um, and so the class sizes are small enough that they're able to get actual intense attention to music theory. So they actually know what they're doing when we're creating this music. So it's so helpful, and I love it. I do. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I want to talk about your commissions this year, and maybe a little bit if you could share the great news about an opera that you're working on first.
Yes. Okay. So I'm writing. Excuse me. It's actually a couple operas. So towards the end of last year, um, there was an opera that I wrote in collaboration with Bear Opera, and it was called The Late Walk, and it was virtual. It was a virtual opera, and it's actually a few stories of short operas, 10-minute operas. And if you guys get a chance to check it out, I think that would be really cool. My opera is called The Late Walk, and Nicholas Cox, I'm hoping I'm saying this right too. I wish I had it right in front of me. But yeah, is the librettist for that opera. And so it's kind of like I don't know, like a opera horror. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. You should check it
Okay,
out. So
I
that's
will.
that. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. But it was a fun time writing that, and even cooler time seeing it perform because it was virtual. So they had like green screen and these different effects and things going on. That was cool. So that's one of
Wow.
them. Another one that I've been actually writing for a few years now is with my friend Joshua Bambury. He's a librettist, and it's called The Illustrator. And that particular opera is on a grander scheme. It's about three African princes who suddenly lost their family to a sudden fire, and they go on a quest to find death and kill death as a persona. So yeah, it's really
Wow.
that story is interesting because we tried our best to make sure it stayed true to African folktale, um, which for me, sorry, my dog is being a dog. Uh, African folktale, which for me has actually been a big part of my childhood. My family made sure that I knew African folk tales and knew stories of like Anansi the spider, and these things were kind of woven into my childhood. So I think it's really important to tell those kinds of stories, and not out of the place of African American history, because a lot of it is often told with a sense of struggle or, you know, different things like that. So I like to give things a little more, you know, my friend and I, we talked about writing things that were a little more lighthearted for African Americans. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that was that, but we also got this really cool opportunity with the Washington National Opera. I'm not sure how much I can talk about it, but there is a project coming later in the year. And our particular piece is about Freddie Gray. And for me, being from Baltimore, born and raised, and I was there when Freddie Gray was killed, and I was there when the riots broke out. I was there. I was there. I was right there. And when the protests happened, I was there. You know, it's so these are this topic of Freddie Gray for me means quite a bit. It's kind of interesting because it's almost as if it's almost like thinking it could have been me within that same kind of spacing. You know what I mean? So I think about all these things, but I'm super honored to write this piece, just because it's it's just so close. You know what I mean? It's just so
Yeah,
close. So
that's
yeah,
amazing. Well, I think all of us, really, whole incident with George Floyd really, it was like the end of the road, that moment last year
yeah,
where we were all thrown into the importance of equity, the importance of Black Lives Matter. And for me, it really changed everything for me, that moment.
yeah,
And I think that, it's we need to reflect that in what we do in the arts. And I'm so proud of you for doing this and
thank
taking
you,
this on. And
thank
I
you,
want to support you as much as I can
thank
throughout all this. And we're just so thrilled to perform your piece on our Masterworks
so
series.
excited.
Yes, and but I think it's just not just talking about it, but doing something about it is
Doing
what's
something about it.
really impactful, and
Absolutely.
I think, you and us as artists, we have this wonderful platform to tell these stories that are so
Mhm.
important,
Yeah.
a part of history that's so important, a part of our culture, right? That's so important. So I commend you for doing that. That's fantastic. What would you like to share with composers and maybe young composers right now out there during this pandemic? What is something that you're instilling in your students today?
Take risks. I think understanding the importance of taking risks, especially in a time like this where nothing is predictable. What's happening next is just not unknown, is not known, and um, is no one to look to for guidance for what to do next because it's so new. Um, I think reinventing yourself in this time or taking a step back from some things that you may have been overwhelmed from, beginning, take some time to work through the basics of it and build your way back into understanding or whatever you need. This is what I tell my students all the time. Whatever you need to get right now, get it, because we don't know when we'll have that time again. We just don't. So
Well, thank you so much, Jasmine. I wish you all the luck and stay safe. And everyone, please watch our premiere next Saturday at 5:30 Pacific Standard Time on our Facebook and YouTube channels. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for being with us.
thank you for having me.